Welcome back for another Friday Night In with 10 Minute Horror. I'm going to throw up a viewer discretion warning on this one. If you have a problem with insects, I'd pour a couple extra drinks and make them stiff. Don't worry though, this story will be over quick. This is INSECTA. I was 10 at the time it happened, and I was fascinated by insects up until that moment. I used to make little towns out of shoeboxes and scraps of paper and cardboard and put beetles I caught from the backyard in them. I liked digging up worms. I liked watching spiders build webs. I was fascinated by it all. One summer, my parents took my younger brother and me on a road trip to the coast. We stopped and camped at different campgrounds along the way. On the night before we got to the coast, there was a storm that was supposed to be coming in. My dad decided to get us a motel room, but everywhere we went, no vacancy. It got late, and we were contemplating sleeping in the car when we saw the dim lights of the Lighthouse Inn. It was run down and missing half its shutters, but there were a few cars in the parking lot and room windows glowing from within. We only needed a place for the night, so Dad got us a room. Thankfully, the only stains were on the floors, from what we could see anyway. I shared a bed with my younger brother and fell asleep to the sound of the storm. When I woke up, I couldn't hear anything out of my right ear. I sat up in bed and frantically rubbed it. My mom was the first one to notice the blood. A line of red had come to a thick smearing on my cheek. The trail led up to my right ear. I poked my index finger in, sliding through blood, and felt something lodged in my ear canal. It felt slimy and blocked my finger from going any further, and then it squirmed. A tremor ran through my head, and I went into full panic mode. My whole body was shaking as I tried to scratch and claw out whatever it was in my ear. The thing squirmed deeper and began humming. I was screaming and my dad was holding me down. My mom grabbed tweezers from her purse and was trying to hold my head still so she could pull the thing out while my little brother Jesse was crying in the corner. Each time my mom clipped down on it, it wiggled in further. She'd pull back quickly, but only get tiny pieces of it. I heard my dad say it looked like an insect. I threw up. The blood was pooling too much in my ear and making it too difficult to see what to grab onto with the tweezers. We got in the car and had an hour drive to the nearest hospital. I didn't move the entire ride there. It felt like every time I did, the insect would squirm in further. When we arrived, there was a 2-car accident that most of the staff was attending to, so we had to wait a half hour to see a doctor. A lot happened in that half hour. At first, I started getting really thirsty, and I mean completely dehydrated thirsty. No matter how much I drank, it was never enough. We ended up moving and sitting next to the water fountain so I could keep going back. I felt something strange happening along the right side of my face. A hot, tingling feeling under the skin like feverish hives. My cheeks began to puff upward. Then I began to cough. It felt like there was a fire in my sinuses that was stretching down into my throat. The more water I drank, the less it soothed the burning sensation. My right eye began to twitch. The lower corner started to fade color and disappear before slowly moving across my whole eye. Then I felt it extending its fever downward, moving along my upper jaw. My teeth felt brittle, then numb. Then I couldn't feel them at all. I was sweating profusely and reached up to comb my hair back through my fingers, but a chunk of hair came with them, and it came easily. I put my hand up again and found the entire right side of my head had swollen up and my hair was only hanging on by loose threads and sweat. My mom screamed, and all the while, it was humming like a little engine. That was the first 30 minutes. We finally saw a doctor, and he immediately called for us to be transported to another hospital. I was sedated and woke up several hours later. When I did, no one knew I was awake. Or maybe they did, but didn't think I could hear them. I was surrounded by specialists of all sorts. There was an oncologist taking the lead with it and discussing options with my parents. I listened to everything they said, which I didn't understand then, but have had time to wrap my remaining mind around now. They'd run MRIs, CTs, EEGs, and even PETs. They managed to take samples of the insect and process them. They found an impossible smattering of information. Nothing like it was on record. As I listened, I felt all the muscles in my right arm seizing up, like they were turning to stone. The insect had released a toxin that cramped and paralyzed my upper arm and shoulder. The poison was moving into my chest. It felt like I had barbed wire wrapped around my lungs, squeezing tighter and tighter with every breath. My blood had thickened into a gelatinous blob, which halted any kidney function. Something bad was going on with the skin around my ear. The doctors believed it was infarction at first, that a blood vessel was blocked by a clot. They thought maybe it was a blocked artery, maybe vasoconstriction, maybe mechanical compression. But then, the area on the outer crust of my ear began to show rapid signs of necrosis, which meant my ear would have to go before gangrene set in, and it had to be done immediately, before the damaged and dying tissue spread further into my skull. I was rushed into surgery for a radical mastoidectomy. They removed my mastoid hair cells, my eardrum, most of my middle ear structure, and my ear canal. This also gave them their first look at what the insect was growing into. Its tiny face resembled a hagfish's, including an extending maw with 3 rows of jagged teeth on 2 bony plates. From its throat, the insect excreted a slimy, pus-like substance forward to allow it to move more easily and squeeze and pass through my auditory canal. The pus also had a numbing effect, so I couldn't feel it when the insect chewed away my eardrum and crawled through it. The insect settled in my tympanic cavity, where it ate my ossicles. Unfortunately, removing the insect wouldn't stop what was happening to me. The insect's mouth had opened fully, and a series of tiny tentacles had sprouted outwards. Not only had the doctors not seen this in an insect before, but stranger than that, it appeared to have certain specific properties akin to carnivorous mollusks, namely, the octopus. This included a rare mutation that caused its tentacles to branch out into more cephalopod-like limbs, resembling a root system constantly expanding and searching and feeding. Like the octopus, the insect's unique location of neurons throughout their limbs allowed them to taste, smell, touch, and act independently of one another. But it wasn't just the limbs that had these computational centers. Essentially, every mini tendril on every limb had its own brain and acted on its own in a strange form of distributed intelligence. The insect managed to continue growing and taking over different parts of my face and skull by using a recruitment mechanism that would pass knowledge from one of its tendrils onto the next after receiving information, just like an octopus. All of this made sense as to why we didn't see the insect in the motel room at first. Octopus have one of the best camouflage systems in the entire world. Whatever this creature was, it had evolved, like them, to not be found. A new specialist was talking about the insect's intelligence. I couldn't understand how something so small could be so smart, but the expert said something that always stayed with me. It wasn't about how intelligent the insect was. It was about how the insect was intelligent. After all, look at what it had done to me. I was a predator over 50 times its size and had vast and expansive abilities far beyond anything this creature could accomplish. And yet here I was. The oncologist recommended trying to treat the insect like a tumorous cancer, since it was multiplying and growing out of control, but in specific regions. In my worsening state, they decided on a cocktail of treatments and surgeries. There was advanced, targeted radiation therapy, a craniotomy, and an endonasal endoscopic surgery, one after the other. The insect had spread its tendrils up into my brain and weaved through the porous organ. The doctors said it looked like a kraken wrapping around an old wooden ship. The thing had latched onto my brain and was trying to pull it under. But it also spread across the right side of my face, most of which had to be removed and then repaired in additional surgeries. My right eye was taken out, as was my nose and most of my jaw. A tracheal surgery was performed, and luckily my throat and neck weren't too damaged. The thoracotomy surgery revealed the insect's tendrils had spread to my heart and lungs, but only minimally. The surgeons managed to remove all of it from my chest. but my shoulder was lost and had to be entirely reconstructed, and the tips of the fingers on my right hand still tingle sometimes. I had over 24 more surgeries in the weeks that followed, but the last half were more cosmetic. I'll be the first person to say they were necessary. I didn't even look human. I still don't. I heard the motel was put under quarantine, but no other specimens were found inside. Although, behind the motel a few hundred yards, there was a rocky beach, and on that beach, there was a massive, dead whale that had been picked apart by all manner of deep-sea creatures. The CDC was called in to contain and study. I never found out anything more about that, though. Anyway, I sleep with an earplug in now. And that concludes tonight's story. We hope you enjoyed INSECTA, and be sure to come back next week for a brand new tale about mirrors and the trouble you can get into with them.